Hello everyone, in this video we'll be wrapping up practical assignment 2. So I'm going to show you a few more things inside of Photoshop, and then after that we'll move over to InDesign and I will show you how we can start laying out a presentation board for our rendered drawings. Alright, so I'm back here in my rendered floor plan and I'm pretty much happy with how it looks at this point. So now there's something that I want to do, which is get rid of my white background that you can see around the edges of the floor plan. All right. The reason for that is we basically want no background at all so that we can place it anywhere on the board. And for example, if there were like a color behind our floor plan, something other than white, we would not want this white border to appear around the floor plan. So we just want to get rid of that. So what you want to do is go down to your very bottom layer if you have a white background put in. And then if you see here, if I were to toggle this on and off, in my case, my white background is actually a part of some of the elements of my floor plan here. So you can see that's actually filling in my windows and some of my doors. So when I turn that off, obviously that's not a good thing because it gets rid of parts of the image that I want. So in this case, what you would want to do is go to your magic wand and then make sure that sample all layers is checked. And then I'm going to go to my white background layer, make sure that's selected, and then I'm going to click on just that portion of the white background that is outside of my floor plan. All right, now all we have to do is just delete that. We can just delete it out. That's probably the simplest way. And then when you're done, Control and D to deselect, and then this is essentially what you want. All right. Now with that gone, I'm going to go back in my layer stack. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Okay. I'm going to go back in my layer stack to my very top layer, and in this case that's just a folder. And what I want to do now is basically create a flattened version of my final image now that I'm happy with it. Okay, so basically what flattening does is it takes all of our layers and it puts it together in just one layer essentially. So it just merges them all together so that it's just a nice flat image that we can export out. So I used this command in the last video, but what you want to do with your very topmost layer or folder selected is click Control, Shift, Alt, and E. All right, now you can see when I do that, I have a new layer on top, and this one says layer 3. And if you were to look at that thumbnail, it basically contains all of the content of all the layers put together. All right, so something else before we go about exporting our drawings is there is a handy plugin that I want to show you that I use a lot whenever I'm doing stuff like this. And it's basically a way to go in and add in some filters. So sort of like if you were adding filters in Instagram or something like that, it's basically just a way to just add extra detail and liveliness to your renderings. Okay, so this plugin, I will go here and show it to you on Google Chrome. So what you want to do if you want this, and this is optional, you want to type in Nik Collection 2012. All right, and then hit enter. And what we're looking for is this top link right here, so Nik Collection 2012. And then this used to be owned by Google, but this company, DxO, purchased it a few years ago, and they now require you to pay for the newest version, but you can still get access to the one from 2012 when it was owned by Google for free. So what you want to do is just put your email address in here and then hit submit, and they will send you a download link for this, and then you just have to follow the instructions whenever you get the download link, and then you can install it on your computer. But once you have that installed, basically what that's going to do is if I go here to my filter panel, I have this option here at the bottom that says Nik Collection. And there are a lot of different tools inside of here, and you can go to their website again and you can take a look at what all these different tools do. because they're really cool and they're really easy ways to go in and edit parts of your images and stuff. They're definitely really good for if you're not super experienced with all the tools inside of Photoshop. You can kind of use these tools and really easily go in and edit it, sort of like in a way that you're more familiar with. So these tools are more similar to like if you were editing a photo on your phone. For example, if I were on my iPhone and I took a picture and I click that little edit button at the bottom and I get a bunch of different options for how I can change how the image looks. It's sort of like that. So it's just a really powerful and user-friendly way to go in and edit images. So I usually like to use them after the fact, after I'm done making something, just to add a little bit more to them. And you'll see in a minute how we're going to do that. So again, you want to make sure that your top layer is selected once you've done this, and it has to be a flattened layer. You want all those layers together in one layer at the top. And the one that I like to use is this one here that says Color Efex Pro 4. All right, that's one we're going to focus on. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to give it a minute to load. And I'm going to ignore this. Okay, so this basically opens up your image in a separate window here. And if I go over here to the left, let me click back here. We have this panel that says recipes. If you were to click up here where it says Color Efex Pro 4, this is basically what I want here. These are all the filters we can apply, and the recipes are basically presets that you can make. So if I applied several filters, I could save all of those settings that I've made into a recipe so that later on, if I were doing even more images and I wanted them to look exactly the same as the one that I just did, I could just click on that recipe and apply it to the image without tweaking any settings, and it would just spit out the exact same configuration for my new image, okay? But you can see we have different categories here. So landscape, wedding, and then architecture is what I like to focus on. As you go in and you add layers, they will appear over here on the right in sort of a layer stack, sort of like what we have in regular Photoshop, okay? So if I clear this out, so right now I have no filters applied, we can go in and just start adding ones in. So the first one that I like to add in is this one that says Pro Contrast. And then once you add these, you can go in here and mess with these sliders, and you can get a preview of what these do as we mess with them. So this one basically tweaks color. You can see it very subtly changing, but since this is mainly black and white, nothing's really happening. If I go in here and start adding in this correct contrast, you can see it starts up the contrast a little bit in the image, and then this dynamic contrast really helps to bring out the details, for example, in the tile and in our countertop here. So if I move that up and down, you can kind of see what that's doing. All right, and then at any time you can hit this compare button, and if you click and hold that, it will toggle between the original, so this is the original, and then this is it with my edits. So you can see what you're doing, and then you can go back and see, am I really making the image look better, or am I making it look worse? All right, so let's say I'm happy with this here. Then at this point, what I can do is go in here and click Add Filter, and that's going to collapse my original one. I can always, click on that and uncollapse it, but that's going to make it so I can add another filter to my layer stack. So then if I want to come in here and use something like Detail Extractor, we can sort of, tweak this a little bit and maybe make it less intense, but that's just going to bring out some even more of this detail that's within the materials. So then comparing that, I could even go in and check that on and off to see what that's doing. So you can see that really brings out the veining here inside of my countertop. And again, you might not want to go too intense with it. Sometimes it looks good to have that detail, but then sometimes when it's just a little bit too much, it becomes, maybe a distraction. So definitely good to just keep things, subtle and not overdo it. All right, but as you can see, just a really good tool, a really easy way to get a lot more detail out of your images. So that's why I like to use it. Other good ones are like the Brilliance and Warmth. That one's more so for like if you're doing an actual rendering of a space. I like to apply that one because it will actually tweak how warm or cool the image looks. In this case for like a floor plan. that's not really relevant, but you can go in here and mess around with them and kind of see what all they do. There's a bunch more here inside of some of these other tabs. So if you click on all, you can see there's just a bunch of them, and there's all kinds of really cool filters that you can apply to get them looking the way that you want. All right, so let's say I'm happy with this configuration. This is what I want to use down the road for some of my other projects. What you could do is go here to click on Save Recipe, and I could write, rendered floor plan. Click OK. And then if I go over here to my recipes section, you can see that appears right here with my other recipes. And then it's just a matter of opening the image inside of this, double clicking it, and it's going to apply the exact same settings as I've configured previously. All right, so then once you're all done and you have it looking how you want, you can just go ahead and click the OK. And when I do that, it takes me back to Photoshop. You gotta give it a minute to process. And when it's done processing, it creates a new layer. All right, so here's the new one with the edits on top of the original. So there's the original and here's the new. And then you can just kind of compare the two. And if it's looking like a little bit much, something that I even like to do after this is maybe take the opacity down slightly of the new one to kind of get a merge between the new and the old. All right, something like that, where it's just, you're upping the detail a little bit, but it's nothing crazy. And then from there, doing the command again to flatten everything. So Control, Alt, Shift, and E. And then this would be my final layer. So these two layers underneath, you could go in and you could, delete them or leave them there if you want. But this one, I'm gonna just call that my final flattened layer. All right, and then once that's done, this is what we can go ahead and export. All right, so I'm gonna save my file. And then now I'm gonna show you how we go about actually exporting this out. All right, so there are a couple different ways to do this. One thing you can do is just go here to File and then Save As. And then within this Save As menu, you can click here on the drop down where it says Save As Type, and then choose any of the image formats that you want. So in this case, since we have this transparent background, right, so we deleted the whiteout, we would want to use a PNG in order to preserve that. If I were to set this as like a JPEG, it would just fill that white back in. It would basically take anything that has this checkered pattern inside of my viewport and replace it with white. Okay, so that's not what we want. You want to use a PNG file. So then you can just go in here and name this maybe like final rendered floor plan and save it. And then you're going to get a little window that comes up, and it's going to ask you something about file size. And you can basically just stick with the default. I usually just use a large file size. But if it is a really large image, you might want to use the smallest file size, and that's going to just make everything a little bit more compact, because sometimes these files do get really big. But I'm just going to leave it at the default and click OK. I never run into issues with that. And then I'm going to show you again, there's another way we can go ahead and do this, which might be a little bit easier. This way it offers a little bit more flexibility. There's an export as option. There is a quick export as PNG, which is nice. So since we're using PNGs, you can just hit that and it'll do exactly the same thing without having to go through that other window. But if you go here again to export and then export as, this will basically bring up a window where you can customize things a little bit better. Okay, so for example, I could choose my file format here, and then you could customize how much resolution you want to output this as. So if you wanted this to be smaller, for example, if I wanted it to be like 1,000. So if I click 1,000 for my width, it's going to update my height correspondingly based on that aspect ratio, I could then go ahead and export it. So something that you want to do inside of Photoshop is basically always be working in a really high resolution so you have all that quality. And then later on, if you have to export out something smaller, say that's like way too high of resolution and the file's too big, you can always dial that down here and it's going to lower the resolution and save it out as a smaller file. But like I said, unless your computer is going really slow and you check your file size and it's huge, like right here, if I were to go back to that, it's going to calculate my file size here. So 1.4 megabytes, that's really not too massive. That's not too big. But again, if you were to go in here and change that to a lower resolution and update it, it's going to recalculate that to something smaller. So 345 kilobytes, that's really small. That's basically a way that you can just make it smaller and more manageable to work with. All right. But yeah, you can use any of those options. Just go ahead and save out your image as a PNG file. And then I'm going to go over here and do the same thing for my elevation. So again, with my elevation, I need to basically go in and turn off my background layer so that I have something like this. I want to make sure that everything is flattened at the top. So create a new flattened layer. And then again, if I wanted to go in and use my filters, and then my Color Efex Pro 4. Once you use the Color Efex Pro 4, if you want the exact same settings, you can just click this button here at the top and it's just going to automatically apply the same settings to whatever your new file is. So if I just hit that, you can see it's applying those same settings as my floor plan. And once that's done, there it is with the exact same settings that I did before. And again, I can maybe tweak this a little bit, merge it with the layer that's underneath it, and then this will be my final flattened layer. All right, so I'll save my project and then I will export this. So I can go here to export, quick export as PNG. And then I can just save this as my final rendered elevation. Okay. All right, so once that's done, that's basically all that we need to do inside of Photoshop, and now we can go ahead and hop over to InDesign. All right, so if I go in here to InDesign, what we want to do is, first of all, go here to Create New, and we're going to create a custom size document. All right, so within this panel, basically we want to set up an 11 by 17 piece of paper, exactly like we had in Practical Assignment 1 for your final PDFs. And to do that, you want to change your units. So picas, this is basically a graphic design unit. We want to switch this to inches and make sure that our width is 17 inches and our height is 11 inches. All right, so with that set, we should be pretty good. 1/2 inch margins is pretty standard. Everything else we can just leave as is, and we can give this a name. You could just name it Practical Assignment 2, something like that, doesn't really matter. Click Create. All right, so then this is going to bring us to our actual workspace. So as you can see, it looks similar to Photoshop, but there are a bunch of noticeable differences. Okay, so your tool sets are different and our layers panel is not really here. You should have a properties panel that is open, hopefully by default. I'm not quite sure what the default configuration is because mine might be set up a little bit different than yours. But if you were to go to workspace and then make sure that you have the essentials checked, and yeah, I think if you just click on that, it's going to, well actually if I click on reset, that's going to take me back to what the default is. So this should be what you guys have whenever you open up by default if you haven't modified anything. All right, so we have a properties panel, and then we have a pages panel, and we have that libraries panel. All right, something that we want to do right away is go up here to, I believe it is window, and we want to click on this links button and make sure that is checked. And that is going to add this extra little flyout here next to our properties. And I'm just going to minimize this right now. I will talk about it a little bit later on and why that's important. But for right now, I'm just going to explain sort of the user interface to you. So the InDesign user interface, we're going to rely more so on those LinkedIn Learning videos, obviously, to learn the tools. You might have had experience with this already, depending on what they're having you do in Studio, because whenever we're using InDesign, this is basically our default tool for setting up like research booklets and presentation boards. So if you've had to do either of these things already in your Studio classes, you probably already use InDesign a little bit. All right. But basically that is our two purposes that we'll be using it if we're setting up some kind of a booklet, research booklet, something like that, or if we're doing our presentation boards for our Studio classes. All right. So the way InDesign works is we're basically bringing in images or any sort of content that we've created in any of the other Adobe applications, and we're bringing these in as links. Okay, so what do I mean by a link? I will show you. So if we want to start adding in content to this, what I'd want to do is go up here to File and then Place. Okay, go to File, Place, and then we'll navigate to our folder where we saved our renderings. And then if I were to click on my floor plan, click Open, that's going to attach that image to my cursor, and then I can click on my my piece of paper here and place it. All right, so now when you look at this floor plan, when it's in here, you can see there's this small icon here in the top left, and that's basically implying that this is a link. Okay, so that is the link icon. So what this is doing is it's not actually taking the photograph itself and putting it into the file. It's basically referencing where the file is on your computer, and it's just looking at it, okay? And it's just showing you what is in that file on the computer. So if I were to go here to that same folder, and this is really, really important, okay? You need to make sure that you are following along with what I'm saying here really closely, because I guarantee you, you're going to get messed up down the road, and you're going to run into a lot of issues with InDesign not working, and this is going to be the reason why. All right, so if I were to go in here and find that image, so my final rendered floor plan, I'm just going to copy it so that I don't lose it. But if I were to delete that out or move it, either delete it or move it somewhere else, you can see once I do that, immediately InDesign is telling me there's a problem. All right, so I'm still seeing a preview of what that file looked like, but it's telling me there's a problem. All right, so and then if I click on my links panel, which I showed you earlier how to get, expand that, it's telling me that the document is missing. All right, and then if I click on that, it's going to open up a window, and this is where I would go to navigate to where that file is now. Okay. But basically, since that file is missing, if I were to then go and save this out, say I'm all done with my project and I wanted to create a PDF from this. Let's see, so let's just print this. You can see when I go to print it, it's telling me that there's links to files that are missing or are not modified. I say OK, and it prints it, and then let me try that again. I'm not sure where it printed to. Oh, let's set this to a PDF file. Print. Okay. And then I will put this back in my folder, and this is my test board. Click Save. All right. So this then is basically what that image looks like. So you can see the quality is really, really bad because the image itself is not in there anymore. It's just using whatever preview of the image it created. So this is not the full quality image, and it just doesn't look very good at all. So that is the kind of issue that you're going to run into if you have either moved your file or have deleted things. You don't want to mess with where these files are located. I'll have to resave that actually. You don't want to mess with where these files are located once you place them in InDesign, or else you're going to run into these kind of problems where it can't find them and your final image, whenever you print it out, looks really bad. Okay, so I'm going to go back here. I'm just going to save that again really quick. Oh. Cancel that. Okay. All right, so I will go and place that again. And that is really big, so I'm going to scale that down. All right, so I'm going to use the scale tool. This is over here under free transform. If I use scale, all right, so this is another good learning moment here. So if I double click off of my picture, you can see I basically have this blue frame out here. So this blue frame is separate from, actually, if I were to double click on that, there's an orange frame within it. The orange frame is the image itself, okay, and I can scale this. And if I hold shift, I can scale it just like I were in Photoshop or something, and I can place that wherever I want. But I still have my blue frame that is around it, and if I were to click off of that, they are tied together, okay? So when the blue frame moves, the actual image moves. All right, so the reason this blue frame exists is if I just click on it, I can drag this around. This basically lets you crop whatever your image is, okay? So if I were to go in here and drag this inward, maybe somewhere like this, you can see it's cutting off what's inside of there. And if I double click again, I can go back and see my actual image inside of it, my orange frame. Okay, so frames, those are important. Just remember, a blue frame is used to crop elements, and the orange frame inside of it is the actual image itself. Okay, and when we click on that, we can scale the image. And if we click outside and use the blue, we can crop the image. There is a way to scale and modify both the orange frame and the blue frame at the same time. I don't recall what it is off the top of my head, but if you've already used InDesign, maybe you know how to do that already. But how I usually work is I will just click on the image and place it where I want, and then if I have to scale or modify, I'll double click inside the frame, and then I will go in here and modify it, and then I will go back outside and I will update my cropping accordingly. All right, so you always want your cropping to be relatively close to the actual image, so that way, if, say I have a bunch of images within this file, I'm not getting messed up and accidentally clicking other images. We don't want anything to overlap, essentially. All right, so once that is placed, I can go in here and I can place my elevation. So I'll go to place, I will find my final rendered elevation, click open, click, and that places out here. And as you can see, my images are really big because they're set up at a very high resolution inside of Photoshop, and that's why I exported them as. If you were to export these out smaller, like I showed you, like a smaller pixel count, it might be easier to place them, and you wouldn't have to go in and modify them. But I like to work at really high resolutions because I know that the final output is not going to look bad in the end if I do that. You always want to have as much resolution as you need. You never want to have a smaller resolution than you need, and then at the end it just looks fuzzy. It's always better to work with something high quality and then shrink it down later on if you have to. All right, but basically you're going to go in here and mess with your frames, get them cropped how you need to, get everything sized how you need to, and then place them on your piece of paper. All right. And again, whenever we're moving these around, make sure you're double clicked outside of the image so that way, like, I'm not accidentally moving the orange frame. You want to make sure if you see the orange frame, double click outside of it just to be on the blue, and then you can drag the blue around wherever you want it. Now, whenever we are arranging elements on a presentation board, something that we can do, which is very similar to Photoshop, is use our guidelines. So if you have your rulers here on the top and on the left, you can click and drag and pull down guidelines, okay? So guidelines are good because they allow you to easily align different elements on your board. So here, for example, if I wanted to align the bottom of this floor to, for example, the top, well actually the bottom of the floor plan. So the bottom of the floor, the bottom of the floor plan, I could do that. You know, another way that we could actually arrange this is I could go in here and edit my document and actually make this a vertical poster. So whenever you're setting up a presentation board, you can lay it out however you want. There's no rule that says it has to be a landscape setup. You could do this as portrait if you wanted. So if I were to click on portrait, we could actually, which might work better for this project since we have our elevation right there, we could actually align the two of these, and you know, in reality, our elevation is falling right there if I drag out some guidelines. So I can go in and align the edge of that there, and then you can use your arrow keys to tweak this, and then go into my orange frame and then scale this down, holding shift to make sure that it's staying where I want it, but just tweak this, get it relatively in line with my guides. So something like that is pretty good. Adjust my cropping. And for example, if I didn't want this floor anymore, you know, the floor is optional. You don't have to have it. You could just crop that out if you wanted to. But now you can see that you're actually seeing the relationship between where this elevation is in the floor plan and where it is, where the elevation, what it actually looks like. All right. All right, so we can go in here and then, you know, modify these however we like, and then once we're done kind of setting up our our images, we can start going in and adding in like text, explaining what the project's about, and just giving annotations to explain everything that's sort of going on. Something else that we can do is actually use effects inside of Photoshop. So for example, or I'm sorry, InDesign. So for example, you have tools like your strokes and your fills that you can use. So if you were to go here and click on your stroke section and then choose a stroke color, you can see now it's applying a stroke to my frame. So I could dial my frame in a little bit so that it's aligning with the edges of my elevation, and I can actually increase the size of this. So if you need to like add in a border or something, you can do all that kind of stuff here after the fact. If you're not in Photoshop anymore, you can bring them in here and you can sort of add in borders to your images. And there's other effects too. A lot of them carry over from Photoshop, like the shadows and stuff like that, but they're not always one-to-one. All right, so we can use things like that in our properties. But then once we sort of get something how we like, we can start adding in text as well. So I kind of, whenever I'm setting up my, my boards, I like to sort of set things up on a grid. So for example, I might bring something over here and just start blocking out relationally how I want things to look. And you want your spacings to make sense between all of your elements here. But you can go in here and start adding in some text. So if I click my text tool, I can click and drag out a text box, and I can snap into my guides, and I can, just practical assignment 2. And then with that selected, you can always come over here and change your font to be whatever you want it. And you can change other things like your font size and your color. So that's controlled by your fill here. So if I expand that, you can go in and you can choose different colors. All right, to be like whatever you want. And then you can just place these, where they need to go. But I'm gonna toggle over to a finished board that I had from last year to kind of show you a little bit better my my approach to setting up boards. Okay, so that way I'm not just doing it from scratch, and you can kind of see something finished and how I go about doing that. So if I go to open and I find that, okay, so what you're seeing here is my final board layout for last year's project 2. Okay, so like I said previously, last year we did the entire floor plan of the house. We didn't just do the laundry and bathroom. So we have our floor plan, we have our elevation, and then we have a color palette, and then over here we have project information. So we have just my name, what the project is, the objective, and then this is just the project scope explaining what the goals of the project are. All right. So what you're seeing here, there's a lot of stuff going on, but basically I have so I have a lot of elements. So I have my actual images themselves, so my floor plan and my elevation. And then what these are, so this is a shape. All right, so I'm going to delete these actually really quick and redraw them. But we have shapes over here inside of InDesign. So for example, we have a rectangle. If I were to click on that and then drag out, that's going to create a rectangle with whatever my foreground color is set to. So just like in Photoshop, we have a foreground color, and if you double click on that, we have a color picker, and that's going to change the color based on what our foreground color is set to. All right. Additionally, we have other shapes. So if you click and hold, we have like ellipses and we have polygons. Okay. And we'll do the polygon really quick. And if you hold shift, those will, you'll be able to draw those uniformly. If you release that, you can distort them and make them elongated, for example. if you wanted to. But if you want to make custom shapes, which is like what this is, so this is just a big triangle, what you want to use is the pen tool. All right, so the pen tool also exists inside of Photoshop. It exists in Illustrator, but this lets you basically click your own points and make your own shape based on those points. So what I'm going to do is basically draw another big triangle like I have here. All right, so if I were to click a point there and then click a point up here and then click another point down here and then click to finish my shape back on my original point, you can see now I have this giant triangle like I had before. All right. With this selected, what I want to do is basically right click on this, and then I want to go to my arrange setting and then send this either to the back or backward. That's going to put that underneath my other elements. And then you can change, different components of this. So if I wanted to change the opacity and make it not so bold, change the color. Well, I think it's easier to do it from this. So if I were to change the color to something else, okay, it's going to update the color. But basically, the reason that I have these shapes is to just break up the monotony of the white background and to add a little bit more visual interest. So what I do is I have played off of the angles that I have here on the floor. You can do the same thing if you want, but you don't have to. I just thought it might be a good way to do it in this example. But you can always go in here with the pen tool and update your points where those fall. So if I click pen tool, I go down here and I hold the control key and then drag on my point. Sometimes it's a little bit finicky. See if I can. There you go. So if you get it just right, you can basically click and drag and set that point to where we're going to go. So my goal right here is to align the blue preview line with the edge of my floor angle that I'm showing right there. And when I have it where I want, I just release it. And then if I go to this point up here, same thing. I'm clicking and I'm dragging up and I'm just trying to get that. I'm just trying to get it so that it's running parallel to the angle of my my floor. So then when I'm done with that, I can basically go and scoot my shape over, and you can go in and tweak it until it's looking just right how you want it. All right, that's pretty close. I mean, it's not perfect, but you could always fix it. All right, so whenever you get shapes in like you want them, you can arrange them. Like I said, going right-clicking and arrange, send to back, or bring to front, whatever, just like you would do in like Microsoft Word or something. You can do the same thing for your text. Okay, so if I were to go here and maybe the text, I want to put that behind it for some reason. It's the exact same thing. Like you just click on any of these and you can right click and then choose their arrangement relative to one another on the document. All right. So like I said, when you're setting up a document, you want to have some sort of a grid framework or a structure, and you want all of the elements on the board to play off of one another. So for example, I set up a series of grid lines here. All right, so we have the top of the floor plan, and that's our main focus, okay? So you also want to have a hierarchy going on, and this all relates back to first year stuff. All right, so this is basic just design concepts 101. All right, so we have hierarchy of our elements. We have our most important element, which is our floor plan. Second most important element is the second largest, that is our elevation. Third most important would be like our color palette, and then we have all the supplemental information that's describing what everything is, okay? All of our labels, all of our text and our annotations. All right, so you can see how I have, first what I did was I inserted my floor plan, so that's the most important thing. Then I started drawing my grid lines, okay, so my ruler lines, based on components of my floor plan. Okay, so for example, this top line aligns with the top edge of the floor plan. Now, I didn't do it to the top of these stairs here because that's not really as big of an element. Okay, so this is much more of a dominant element when you're just looking at it on the page, this solid black line here at the top. So then that gives me a framework for where I align everything else. So here I have aligned the top of my little color palette swatch to the top of that floor plan. And then carrying over, the top of my name and this text box aligns again with all the rest of that stuff, okay? So we have a clear visual relationship between the three components that are on the page, all right? And this just helps everything look more organized. It helps with how people read the information. You want things to be aligned and relational to one another. You don't just want it slapped on the page, however you're doing it, you know. This isn't just like pins on a tack board. We want to set this up with some sort of like in a coherent manner in a way that makes sense. Okay, so then if we go down here at the bottom edge of my floor plan, that is aligning to the bottom edge of my floor here on my elevation. And then my text box, I like to just constrain to the bottom edge there. All right. Then my two big regions here, so my triangle here on the right, my triangle here on the left, these are obviously playing off of the angles of my floor. And what these do are they establish 4 separate regions of the board, okay? And this just helps further break up the material in a way that makes sense and is visually interesting, okay? So really quickly, I'm going to switch over to a preview mode. This is something that you can always do as you're going through because these lines and everything going on the screen sometimes is intense and it's hard to see what's going on. So if you go here to View, Screen Mode, Presentation, that will take you to just a preview of how the finished board is looking. So you can see the final layout in full quality. So you can see everything got clear. But like I said, these angled regions that are playing off of the lines on my elevation here are creating 4 regions on the board, okay? So we have a region over here, this gray region, which is essentially reserved for my floor plan. This top region up here, this is basically reserved for the information relating to what the project is about. This one over here is reserved for information pertaining to the project scope, and then this one is relating to the elevation. All right, so whenever we put graphics in, graphics help to make things look more interesting, but it's really good and it makes your designs and presentations look even better if you use them in a way that plays off of the information that's actually on the board. Okay, so like I said, it's serving 2 purposes. It breaks it up and makes it look more interesting instead of it just being solid white background, but it's also serving as a way to divide up and break up the information into different regions on the actual presentation. All right, so that's just a little bit of my methodology behind how I go about setting these up. If you want to take that and run with it or do your own thing, it's up to you, but really you should use the basic concepts of design being hierarchy, and organization, and integrate them into whatever you're doing. All right. Another thing to note when I'm talking about hierarchy, so we have a hierarchy of information importance here. All right. So the things that are the biggest and most bold, for example, my name, the headers, so my project scope, and my visualization right here, project 2 visualization. Anything that is just generic information relating to the regions on the page. And then underneath that is your supplemental information, and that is, it's more of a gray color and it's a smaller font. And again, if everything is the same size and the same color on the page, it just doesn't read as well. So you want to have hierarchy when it comes to your headers and your labels and your supplemental information. Okay, there has to be a clear delineation between them. Okay, All right, so going back here, I'm going to show you one more thing, and that's how I created this color palette. Now, this is optional. I want you on your final submission to have information like I'm showing here, and it can be pretty much the exact same thing I'm showing here. You can basically copy the same information I'm showing. But the point is, I want you to have text on your page that tells me something about the project, okay? Because that's what you're going to have on your real projects. All right, so have some sort of text like I'm showing here. You can use this example however you like, but I want to have labels. Okay, so I want to have on your floor plan, I want a label showing that that's the laundry and bathroom, and I want labels showing that that's the elevation. Labels are important, and if you don't have them, I will mark off. But you also have to have this sort of supplemental information, and it can be the same as what I'm having, or you can totally make it up and just do something that would make sense if it were your own project, okay? Now, this color palette section, how I did that, that was basically with these shape tools. So all I did was I went here to my rectangle tool and I chose, I'm just going to choose a color really quick to give this. Doesn't really matter. Oh, all right, let's create a new shape. There we go. And then once I have these, all you do is use your eyedropper tool. With it selected, if I go to eyedropper tool and I click on parts of my image, it's going to sample that color and apply it to the swatch, okay? After you've selected something with the eyedropper tool, if you want to sample a new color, all you have to do is hit Alt, and that will flip your cursor. So you can see when I did that, the cursor flipped from the right to the left, and now I can click on a new color, and it's going to update to that color. All right, so you can go around and you can click on any color you want, and it's going to update. Now, another thing that's cool is if you click on your eyedropper tool and expand that, you have a color theme tool. This tool basically, if you click any image, so say I was going to click on my floor plan over here, you can see what that does is it creates this other window here, and it basically just takes and it finds a sampling of colors throughout the actual image. You can click this option here, and you can sort these based on different themes, okay? So colorful, bright, dark, muted. And you can just toggle through these, and it's just going to take a representational sampling of whatever that image is. All right, these you can add to what are known as swatches. I'm not going to really get into swatches. You can look those up or reference the LinkedIn Learning videos for those. But basically, those are collections of colors. You know, if you're working on a project and you have a color theme, you can apply those to your swatches and save them, and they're always there for you to pull from on the side. Okay, but you can go around to any image and click on it, hold Alt whenever you do a new one, and that's going to update my colors. And here I can, here's a representational sampling of all the colors that were within my image here. All right, so then once you have that, you can basically leave this on the side, and you can click these colors, and if you click on your objects, you can apply them directly, okay? If I hold Alt and I copy that to the side, okay, and then I do that a few more times, and as you do this, you can see it's automatically spacing them correctly for me when I get those green things popping up, so I know that the spacing is consistent. But when I have that, and I go and I use my color swatch tool, I can click on these colors and then just go and then click on my shapes, and I can apply those directly to the shapes. So that's a really easy way to create just a color swatch sampling on your board. All right, and then if you wanted to get these to fit perfectly inside of the boundaries here and here, like I am showing, you can just select all these at the same time and then scale them up proportionally together so that they're correctly within this boundary here and here, and they're aligning, like for example, with your elevation. All right. So that's basically how I did everything on my board. If you're working through here and you want a little bit higher quality of a preview of your images, you can go here to View, go to Display Performance, and then switch this from either fast or in typical to high quality. And that's going to show you the full quality of the images as you're working. So that's a little bit nicer to look at than the low quality version. But if your files are really big and your computer can't really handle them, and your viewport is running really slowly, so if it's very laggy and it's hard to zoom in and out and work on things, you want to switch this back to the either fast display or typical display. And so that's typical, you don't even see a preview. Let's see, display performance, typical display. So you want to switch it back to something like that so that you can move around and zoom in and out a lot quicker and navigate easier. All right, so I think that's pretty much it. The only last thing would be make sure that when you're working on this and you're adding in your links, always check this links panel and make sure you have no errors. Okay, so like here, for example, I have no errors because nothing is showing up in this column here. Oh, one last thing. Okay, so let's say I wanted to change this. Let's say I was not happy with my image and I want to go back to Photoshop and I want to change this. If I go in here and, for example, I'm just going to make something different. I'm just going to add in a blue color. Okay, there we go. If I were to save this and overwrite the previous, right there, PNG. Okay, overwrite the previous, save it, replace it. Anytime you modify a file, that's fine, but you have to go in here and update it. Okay, so you'll always get a notification that that file has changed by the warning error or warning icon up in the top left. And if you expand your links panel, you'll see that warning right here. You just want to click on this, click on the image, right click, and then choose update link. Okay, and when you do that, you can see it pulls in the new version and everything is fine. So anytime you change it, make sure you pull this up and you right click and you update link. Okay, and if, for example, you were to move this to a different location by accident, so if I were to move this back a folder, all right, see, I get that error again, but this one, it's different. It says the link is missing. So in that case, you have to relink it. So if you right click and relink, you want to navigate to wherever you move that. Okay, so I want to find the new location. So it's here now, and I want to select it here and then click open, and then that fixes the error. Okay, so relinking is for when a file moves locations on your computer, and updating a link is when you save over the original and you want to bring the new version in. Finally, I'm going to show you how to save out the final board when you're finished with it. It's really easy. All you have to do is go up here to File and then Export, and then choose a location to save and give it a name. All right, and then once you do that, it's going to bring up this export window. Just leave it at high quality print by default. If you save this out and you notice that the file size is huge, you can use one of these other settings like small file size. But you can usually just leave it at high quality print and then click on export. All right, and then that will save it. Then if you go in and find where you saved it and then open it, you should see the final board exported out how you want it. All right, so that's all I want to show you for this video. Again, please let me know if there's any questions, and good luck finishing the assignment.